Okay. Do you long to leave your current career or job behind and follow your heart to your true passions instead? Today's guest, Rob Gerrand, did just that. He took a chance on himself and walked away from a successful life in the corporate world to pursue his passions in art and writing, and it paid off. Hello and welcome to another episode of Ironing Out the Wrinkles. I'm your host, Ros McMaster.
And I'm your host, Kate Shaw. Together, we're taking the age out of ageism, helping men and women embrace life after 50 with less fear. Now a well-established and highly regarded writer, editor and publisher who lives in Melbourne, Rob Gerrand actually has no plans to retire. His most recent book is the crime novel, The Millennium Job. Set in Australia and the US, he's currently working on the follow-up novel, The Green Job. Rob is on the board of SANE Australia and Melbourne Primary Care Network, which operates the Northwestern Melbourne Primary Health Network. SANE is for people experiencing recurring, persistent or complex mental issues and trauma, and for their families, friends and community. Rob believes that good food, exercise, namely tennis and walking, and social interaction with friends is important for a happy life. Believing in exercising the mind, he is always learning, reading, writing, and maintains a positive outlook no matter what.
So join us in this episode as we talk to Rob about aging well. You'll be inspired to hopefully believe in yourself and motivated to keep moving forward towards your own dreams. Rob, welcome.
Welcome, Rob.
Hello there.
So, it sounds like you're making all the right moves. So far, all the research says that we've got to have the right mental approach, keep fit, moving our bodies, putting the right food into our bodies. So you're already doing the right thing. You know, we actually sadly have this longing to speak to some guests who struggled with moving into having all those in place, because we want people to talk about the fears that they had and how they overcame them. But have you always, like right from a child, had that kind of a mindset that you just went after the things that you wanted fearlessly?
Well, backing track a moment, to me, age, it's a physical thing, of course, because we were born and we eventually leave the planet. But I think it's usually a state of mind. And I remember in my 20s, I felt some people had decided that was as far as they were going to grow, and they were old people in their 20s, whereas I never thought that. I think if you just think, what am I interested in? What can I do? How can I pursue it? Do I need training to do it? Do I need to, practice at stuff? If you follow those sorts of interests, which may become passions, then you're constantly growing. And to me, if you're constantly growing, then you're not aging. You're just becoming a little bit different. You're evolving, if you like. And to me, that's a really important difference between people who feel that growing old is somehow limiting them in some fashion. Now, we become physically frail, but we can become mentally frail. But if we're still doing things that interest us, that we have some passion for maybe, then I think we're just going to be very much alive.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a good point. And the thing is, you might slow down, not be as physically fit anymore, but it's not stopping you. It's just doing things in a different way now, but you're still growing and still changing and, not hanging on to the way you were in the past, but adapting now and continuing to move forward with what you have.
Yeah, I do think that the things you mentioned about physical exercise is very important. And clearly, I'm in my 70s. I can't do the things that I could do in my 20s, but I can still do exercise. And I still play tennis. I still walk. Occasionally I'll swim. If you keep your body active, if you don't use it, you lose it, as the cliche has it. And similarly, mentally, if you're not doing things to challenge yourself, which could be seeing interesting movies, reading books, talking to people, involving yourself in social groups. If you can be on a not-for-profit board, like I'm on a couple of boards that are in that sector, I've been on many other boards in the past, but you're keeping engaged with people. And I think that keeps you young in your spirit. And particularly if you can be around where there are younger people that you can talk with, get stimulated by, challenged by, maybe challenge them a bit. Those sorts of things are a way of keeping your life really valuable and energetic.
Yeah, that's very important, that cross-generational mixing. They say it's really important, not just for young people to understand what older people life experience is, but for you to keep learning as well, because younger people tend to be a lot more up with the times, and if you don't understand what's going on, you can get left behind, can't you? And that's where you start to feel a little bit invisible as an older person, because you can't keep up. But
Yeah.
that cross-generational vibe's really important.
Well, I'm blessed with two granddaughters, one's 16, one's 21, and seeing them grow up has in a way been very stimulating for me, because you meet the friends of your grandchildren, you see what sort of people they are, you see what their interests are. Some of the stuff is beyond me, I suppose. I'm not into TikTok. Maybe I should be, in terms of, it's apparently very important for getting your books well known these days.
I love
So
Yes.
social media is
Do
something.
you? Yeah, well, you've got great books. It's got to get the message out there. That's right.
Yeah, but certainly engaging and listening, particularly listening to people, is so important. Um, if you hold yourself up to be some sort of authority and want to just lay down laws or advise people, that often doesn't get you very far. Whereas if you're willing to listen to others, then you can have a communication.
Yeah, absolutely. So you're not at that stage yet where you're always saying, back in my day.
Never. I
Well,
can't
I hope
see.
someone shoots me if I start doing that.
I have to disclose to all the listeners that Rob happens to be married to my beautiful sister, Maggie. So I know how inspiring Rob is, and that's why I was really asking him to be our guest, because he is pretty amazing, all the things he does. It's always been can do. He helped me with an audition with all the technology, and he can even act as well. He was my so-called husband. Yeah, he's very, very adaptable. And that's what you're saying. You've got to be adaptable, don't you, Rob?
Yeah, and I mean, Maggie, my wife, has been fantastic in terms of the food we eat, because she's a very good cook. She's pescatarian. In other words, she doesn't eat red or white meat, but she eats seafood and largely vegetarian. So our diet is largely pescatarian ones. I mean, if she's away doing business or something, I might heat up a pie for lunch rather than not. But so I still eat a bit of meat. But our diet is very largely full of fresh fruit and vegetables, the Mediterranean diet, I suppose. And that's important for your physical health as well.
Yes, physical and mental health.
And
Because
mental
what you
health.
put, what you put in your body affects your ability to think clearly, everything. Well, it's the Nourish coaches that we had on one of our episodes. They were talking, you can't separate any of them. It's
No.
like a web. They all interact, don't they? The physical, the mental, the emotional.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I've noticed too over the years, Rob, you've become quite a good cook. You're better than me. And you can even make a mean loaf of bread as well. So,
And
yeah.
that was one of the benefits of COVID.
And the benefits of being adaptable, see?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
But if you think I'm a good cook, that's I'll take the compliment, but I'm good at following a recipe.
Yeah, that's what my daughter says. You can cook if you follow a recipe, but that's my problem. I
Yeah.
don't.
So anyone who's dissatisfied with where they are in the corporate world, and they're coming to that stage in life where they wish they were brave enough to leave and follow their dreams. How old were you actually when you moved out of that corporate world? Were you at retirement age?
Well, I was in the corporate world and to a small extent I still am, I suppose, because it was a gradual change rather than a sudden separation. I left my job as the head of Group Public Affairs at ANZ Banking Corporation, and that was their decision, not mine. So that was a bit traumatic at the time. But I then set up a one-person consultancy where I was providing a range of marketing, governance, and management consulting advice to various different clients. And I still do a tiny bit of that these days. But it gave me the opportunity when I wasn't tied down to not just 9 to 5, but 7 to 6 or 7 to 7 job, to being able to do a range of other things in my time. And I've always been a writer, but mainly corporate writing. I did a bit of writing in science fiction back in my youth, relatively speaking. And so I was able to get back into writing, and I wrote a couple of self-help books with a friend, Rewrite Your Life and Rewrite Your Relationships. And that was very stimulating because to do those books, we interviewed about 40 different people to find out what was happening in their lives. And the Rewrite Your Lives books are about the thoughts we have which determine our behavior. So it's based, I suppose, on cognitive behavior thinking, in that if you think you're no good at something, you probably won't try it. If you are a procrastinator, then you have a script in your head that says something like, I'll do it tomorrow. Won't matter if I don't do it today. And we're all guilty of that, I think. I mean, I am still. And we just had New Year's Eve, and people, it's traditional that you have a New Year's Eve resolution or several of them. And most people wake up on New Year's Day, maybe with a hangover. We had a good celebration the night before. And you think, oh, it's a bit too hard. I'll put off my New Year's resolution till tomorrow. And tomorrow comes, and maybe you put it up to the next day. So if your script in your head says, I'll put it up till tomorrow, then that's what you'll do. But if your script in your head says, okay, I know I'm going to do this, but I'm going to try and do it, then maybe you will try and do it. And similarly, many of our scripts get implanted when we're very young. So if you're physically a year behind the development of some other kids when you're 5 or 6 or 10, you may not be as good at sport as the other ones, but it may not be that you're no good at sport. It may be that you're not as strong yet, or not as haven't grown as skillful yet. But you get told you're no good at footy, or you're no good at cricket, or you're no good at swimming, whatever that is, and you believe that. So you never try, or you may be told you're no good at maths, or you can't write, and then you think, I'm no good at maths, and you never try it. So if you find an area that you want to change in your life, you can think about what are the scripts that are dictating my behavior. And it may be that you want to get fitter, or you maybe want to lose weight. And so you look at what your scripts are, and you may be that you say, I don't like exercise. But it may be that there's certain exercises you don't like, and maybe you don't mind walking. So if you get a dog, then you can walk a dog. A few people walk cats, which is bizarre, but I've seen it places. So in other words, we're in much more control of what we are doing and how we evolve, how we age, if you like, than many people think they are. And so we have the opportunity to change ourselves if we wish to.
Takes courage to change, doesn't it?
Yeah, that's fabulous. And I think that's a really important point too. You know, when you reach that middle part of your life where people automatically, there's just this drive within them to do something differently. It seems to happen automatically. But if you're carrying that script from the past that says you can't do anything, you can become really stuck, I think. So if you're stuck and you know you want something more from the second half of life, you need to really go back and reflect on what it is that's stopping you and what's the script that's playing in the back there.
That's right. I remember when I was growing up, if someone reached 60 or 70, they were old, decrepit, you know.
Agree.
I'm in my 70s now, and I don't feel decrepit. You know, I remember my wife went to a science conference in New York some years ago where the theme was 90 is the new 50, or 50 is the new 90, I forget which one it is. But in other words, through diet, exercise, all the things we've been talking about, people when they reach 90 probably are like people who reached 50 years ago.
Yes.
And often I read stories or believe that people retired at 65, men in particular would then go to the golf course or they'd stop whatever they were doing, and they usually die in 2 or 3 years, probably
Yeah,
bored
like a
out of their brain.
purpose. Yeah, probably.
So if you don't think about retirement as retirement, in other words, stopping stuff, but rather as change. So you may stop your work at 65 or 60 or whatever age you choose to stop it. It doesn't mean you stop doing stuff. And I think if you stop doing stuff, you may as well die. So what I'd recommend is, what do you want to do? What do you like doing? Do that, explore that.
Yeah, that's fabulous.
Keep young.
You know, as a child, Rob, I remember your mum, she was wonderful, she was a psychologist, wasn't she? Did she actually mold you and convince you that you were always able to follow a particular mindset or interest? I imagine she probably would have been like that.
Well, certainly both my parents encouraged us just to do whatever we wanted to do. They were never saying you must do this or you must do that.
There was 5 of you, wasn't there? Was there 5?
Yeah, 5 kids, yeah.
Yeah.
4 boys, one sister, one daughter. But my father was an electrical engineer, a civil aviation engineer in the end. So I studied electrical engineering at the university. I never intended to be an engineer, but I had the belief that I needed something to fall back on if whatever else I did failed. And that's probably a pretty stupid thing to do. That was just inheriting the family tradition, if you like. It's much better. I'd always encourage our 2 children to, whatever they want to do, I'd support them, wanting them, allowing them to do it or helping them to do it. And if you as a parent or a grandparent can support your children or grandchildren to try and find out who they are and be themselves, that's the best gift you can give them, I think.
Definitely. Definitely, we agree. Yeah.
Yes. And can you mind talking about, I know that I was telling Roz, I'm very proud of you, how you were involved in that movie Fortress,
Yeah, well,
the American film?
Yeah, it's a film that Village Roadshow produced here in Australia with Warner's, I think. So it was a joint venture. It's filmed on the Gold Coast. I published a collection of science fiction original stories with Outback Press that Maurice Schwartz ran in 1979, called Transmutations. And I'd kept in touch with Maury over the years. And he obviously had links to Village in some fashion, and he'd been commissioned by them to produce a novel of the movie. So he rang me to say, did I know someone who could write the novel of Fortress? And I said, well, I can do that. And I had a tape of a rough cut of the movie. I had a script of the, I think it was the final, I think there's another script edition after the one I got, because they still hadn't quite completed the film when I was given these things. And I wrote that book in about 2 weeks, or 2 weeks.
Roz has written books, so she can relate to that.
I've written a book.
But that's a very good book. But Rob, that's amazing, isn't it? What a great experience.
Yeah, and so one of Maury's publishing incarnations published that book, and that was a bit of fun. That came out in 94 or 5, 94, yeah. So it's
Kelly went to the opening of that. She was very excited. Yeah, it's my daughter. Yeah.
Yeah. So
I can't claim credit for the movie, but I can claim whatever credit there is to a book of the movie.
Right.
Yeah.
That's great. Thank you.
If we can just backtrack 1 minute to when you say you lost your position at the bank, and it was a bit of a shock to you then. What did you do to move through that period of loss, I guess, if as it were?
Well, ANZ offered me, and I took it up, an outplacement with a firm that was called DNA at the time, where you had a range of, I don't think how you describe it, but it was basically helping executives work out what they wanted to do next.
All right. So you didn't really have any downtime. You were offered something pretty much.
Well, I went into this process over a few months of going in and meeting other people and talking, and people talking about different things that you could do. So that was downtime in terms of not earning money. And I decided that I would set up a consultancy, one-person consultancy, Gerrand and Associates. And at the time, I remember talking to one of the people running it, who later on became my accountant, about whether I should start a company or just a one-man band. And he said, "Well, what do you want to do? Do you want to be involved in management, or do you want to be involved in giving advice?" And I decided I didn't want to be running a group, managing people anymore. I mean, at ANZ, I had a team of about 130 people in Australia and New Zealand. So I thought it'd be much simpler and give me more freedom just to have a one-person shingle out there. And I got a lot of work and did, was very busy for the next 20 years at least. And in the last 10 years or so, I got more into board work and less into the consulting stuff, and focus on governance, which I find extremely interesting. And I'd recommend to anybody who's wanting to think about work in a different way to get involved in some sort of board activity. And that could be a committee in a sporting club, a chess club, environmental group, any group where there's people coming together where they need a bit of organization to look at the finances or the way things are organized. And if you like doing that, it could be in a political group, whatever it is. Then if you find that interesting, there's lots of not-for-profits or commercial boards that are looking for good people. And you often say, well, you can't get on a board unless you've got experience. So one way to get experience is to join a smallish community activity. Could be at a school council. It doesn't really matter what it is. If you get involved and you find that that's satisfying for you, then you can do various courses to improve your governance skills, and then there's a path. So I've been, I was chair of Parks Victoria. I've been on a range of different boards over the years, just on these two at the moment, which I'm still interested in.
Especially SANE, they do great work, don't they?
Yes.
Yeah, SANE Australia. I was on the board of the Florey Institute of Neuroscience and Mental Health, and the reason I was on that is that I've been on another board called the Mental Health Research Institute, and I've been on there for many, many years. And I helped negotiate a merger between MHRI and the Florey, and part of that merger resulted in me joining the board of the Florey. In the building that we built, so MHRI, the Florey, the University of Melbourne all put money in, and state and federal governments put money, built the Melbourne Brain Centre. And on the ground floor was the DAX Centre, which is a way of using art by people with mental health issues or suffering trauma have created. And a guy called Cunningham Dax was the Victoria State psychiatrist. And when he was running that, he collected the artworks that his patients were producing, and that formed the Dax collection. And so the Dax collection had a link to MHRI in that we provided the management of the people in the Dax Centre. It was funded through the state health department. When the Melbourne Brain Centre was set up, DAX became an independent body, own board, And because I was on the board of the Flory, which was the landlord for the DAX, I got asked would I join the board of the DAX Centre. So I did. I always say yes to these sorts of opportunities. And then when the DAX went through some financial problems, we looked around for a merger partner, and we talked to a few people and ended up merging with SANE Australia, and that's why I joined the board of SANE. So SANE is an advocate for and a support for people with complex mental illness. There's many organisations looking at other forms of mental illness. Beyond Blue is great in raising awareness, particularly of bipolar depression. But we are focusing at SANE on the more complex schizophrenia, anxiety, all the things that used to never be talked about, but fortunately now society is allowing people to feel less stigma in being able to talk about them. And that's one of the first things. You open the door, shed a bit of light, and people discover that more than 1 in 5 of everyone has had some sort of mental illness or will have some
especially
mental
since
illness.
COVID. Yeah, COVID's
And
contributed to
COVID's
that.
given an extra focus to that too.
So are you finding, I mean, one of the big issues that concerns people about getting older is declining into more depression and anxiety. So are you finding that with your involvement in mental health area?
Well, people do suffer from depression. I think the issue is to recognise that something's happening to you, if this indeed is happening to you. So being able to talk about it is very important. And until relatively recently, it was very shameful to admit that you had some mental illness. You might feel you'd lose your job if you're told, or your family might not understand it. Fortunately, you've got, leading footballers or leading artists or politicians even who are now saying, I've been there, I've done this. There was a senator from Tasmania, Senator Sherry, who attempted suicide about 15 years ago, and then he didn't succeed, fortunately, and came out as a great advocate for helping people. And this is one of the areas in our community which is bipartisan. So you get great support for work in mental health, not just from one side of politics, but from both. Even the smaller parties, I think, acknowledge that it's a community-wide thing. It doesn't single out any particular age group, any particular gender, any view of the world. It could happen to any of us. So it affects how you age to some extent. If you feel that life is hopeless,
Exactly.
it could lead to suicide, or it could just lead to not functioning very well and shutting down. So SANE is there to try and engage with people. Often people have slipped through the cracks and are not being given support through the Lifeline or Beyond Blue or the more mainstream mental health services, and we're trying to help those that need the help probably most.
Yes, yeah, because apparently it is a really big issue for a lot of people as they're aging, when they feel like they're losing the ability to control a lot of their lives and what's happening around them and to them.
Well, you asked before about the change from the corporate world when you retire. For some people, that is not just a sudden shift from work to non-work, or from having money and not earning money, but it's also a shift from relevance to non-relevance.
Yes, it's a whole identity, isn't it, in their job? Yes.
You remember a film years ago called The Full Monty?
Yes, of course.
One of the guys in that would get up dressed in his suit and his briefcase and leave the family at 8 in the morning and go and not go to work because he couldn't bear to tell his family that he'd lost his job.
And that still happens today.
Yes.
Yes. Sad, isn't it?
So that if you have that sense that I'm now worthless because I'm not given the recognition I used to get, that can be very soul destroying. And that's another reason why I believe that if you find, okay, I've now stopped that phase of my life, I'm now in the next phase, it's not going to be, I'm going to lose some relevance, I'm going to lose some people giving me feedback of great job, but I'm going to find the things that I want to do now, the things that I want to
Yes.
do.
Yes, that's the nature of the whole mindset, isn't it? And not staying attached to that image of who you were, but rather, well, where am I now and what do I want to move towards?
Well, I was
That's
so
right.
delighted, Rob, when I discovered that your paintings are quite good because I went to art college. I didn't realise that Rob could paint as well. And they're pretty good. And good on you for doing that. And then writing these books. So you're pretty busy.
Yeah, well, I mean, my wife gave me as a, I think, a 50th birthday present, a CAE, Council of Education course in drawing. And I really got taught by a very good teacher. She showed that the important thing is what you actually see. And by training to look at something properly, you can then draw it. And then I was very scared of using oils. So I just draw stuff with pencil or charcoal. And then I did another course at the CAE, which was for beginners in portraiture and oils. And that was a real eye-opener because it showed me that first of all, he taught us how you would mix a color on your palette. And then you look at you, Roz, or you, Kate, and you'd find a color, say, on your forehead, and you put that on the canvas. Then you find another part of the face that has the same color, put it there and put that there. Then you do a different color. And so you'd be looking all the time and then painting what you saw rather than having in your head, oh, there's going to be a red face or a red lips or white hair or whatever it is, because that's not true. When you look carefully, you see, you may think it's red lipstick, but you look carefully and you see there's some very dark things in the corner of the mouth where the shadow's there. There might be a red highlight. It could be a bit of white from the light shining off it. If you paint a glass, you think a glass is clear and there's nothing there. But in fact, when you look at a glass, whether it's empty or not, it's got reflections in it. And so you're not looking to paint an idea of a glass, but you're painting of what you see. So I did that, and that was really stimulating.
And they're great. I can't wait to see some more of them.
Yeah.
And
Because
what's
I'm
Dave?
focusing
Go
on my
on.
writing, I'm not doing any painting at the moment.
Yeah, you haven't got time, but hey, with the books, where do you get your ideas?
Well, with the Millennium Job, it started with a scene I wrote some years ago of a young woman waking up in bed with a dead body next to her that she'd never seen before in her life, didn't know who it was. And so I wrote that scene. It's quite a good, grips you to read it.
Yeah, it is. I've
And I
read it.
thought,
It's
what the hell
great.
do I do next? And I just couldn't think of it. Then a few years ago, my daughter gave me as a birthday present a membership of a writers group where we met for 5 hours every Saturday, every second Saturday. And initially I thought, well, I've already produced several books. Why do I need to go to a writers group? Anyway, I went along and it was the best thing because each fortnight you bring along up to 3,000 words of what you were writing. And that gave me the motivation. And looking at what I'd written, I decided instead of trying to work out a plot, I just follow the characters. And so where the characters took me is where the story went. So my ideas came from thinking about the characters, and the more they become real in your mind, then what they want to do is what they want to do, not necessarily what I want to tell them to do.
So they have a life of their own.
Yeah, they do.
Wow. Gee.
Yeah.
Oh, that's how you do it.
That's wonderful.
And
And
so
I was just
we
going to
just
say
did it.
that goes back to your advice too about never thinking you know everything. You went
Absolutely.
along and you ended up learning. So
Yeah.
sorry I interrupted.
And I was going to say, well, actually, it's a good point because we don't know the half of what we are. And what we think we are is part of it. but we don't know whether we could suddenly become a good singer or become a painter or become a good cricketer or someone who's good at playing cards, or it doesn't really matter what it is. But until you try something and then find out, then you can find maybe you are good at something like that and you actually like it as well.
Yeah.
But with the Millennium Job, the book starts, the young woman, about 30, she had a big night out at a Christmas party, had too many drinks. When she wakes up, she doesn't remember how she got home, and that's when she finds this guy in her bed, and she doesn't remember meeting him or anything about him. And she calls a girlfriend who happens to live in the same apartment building, a few floors different, and she panics and she comes down, and her friend comes down, and they decide they just move the body into the lift and shut the door of the apartment and wash the sheets and forget about it. So they get rid of the body from their world at the moment. And then some Sunday morning jogger gets into the lift to go jogging and just sees this dead body and rings the police. And the police aren't sure this is just some idiot ringing them on a Sunday morning, but they go there. They say, which lift is the middle one? So they open the door, there's no body. The body's disappeared. And so they're wondering whether this guy was for real or not. And then the two young women decide, oh, it's stupid to pretend it didn't happen. So they ring the police and say that we found this dead body. And the police come again. They say, where's the body? We put it in the lift. So gone from there. It's a bit of a comedy in this book.
It's a really
Yeah,
good
it
book, though.
sounds
It's
it.
very gripping. Yeah.
It'd make a great movie.
That's what I said.
think
I
so
put
too.
my
So
hand up to be
I'd
in the
get Netflix
movie,
to-
being an actor. And you're working on a
But the
second
point I
book.
want to make is that I decided there'd be a detective, and I made him a Vietnamese Australian, John Nguyen, and he had two offshoots: a young woman, Carol McTeish, that's 22, just a constable. This is her first detective job, and a Sergeant Graham Brothers, who's in his 40s, and they investigate the whole thing, and they end up going partly to LA and to New York, and before the whole thing makes sense. But I decided to keep the same detective crew in the next book, which is The Green Job. And that's an environmental crime novel where a researcher researching how to change wheat is found dead in his laboratory. And outside the laboratory, a lot of green groups have been protesting about GM foods and things like that, which is why it's called The Green Job. And I've discovered in writing this, I'm about halfway through, that Carol McTeish is starting to take on a life of her own as a feisty young constable, and the book's getting more and more about her and her relationships. I've discovered she's got a mother that she's got real issues with, and all this sort of stuff.
Oh, I love
Again,
it. Well, it must be quite enjoyable writing it then.
it is, until you get stuck and not knowing where to go next and trying to what would this
Yeah.
do.
Oh, yeah.
Well, try and use the analogy of what you were learning at the art workshop.
Yeah.
That'll
bits.
help you know where to go with your book next.
Yeah. Oh,
In fact,
so
I'd
when
recommend to anybody who's transitioning from one type of lifestyle to another, and it could be retirement, it could be the kids are left home, whatever it is where you've got a gap in your life, one thing I'd recommend is to take a course at a CAE in, it could be a writing course, it could be an art course, it could be music, learn an instrument. It's never too late to start something. I think I was brought up to believe that unless you started something pretty young, you wouldn't have much chance of doing it later on.
Yes.
me too.
But learning a language, for example, I mean,
Mhm.
I thought if you don't hear the language by the time you're about 12, then you won't really have a good accent. Well, that may be true, but it doesn't stop you learning it. And so if you want to keep young, learn something, take something up.
Yes, and I think that's the secret too. You might say, well, I don't know what I'm passionate about. Try anything.
Yeah,
Just try anything. I met a woman actually, she was in her 60s and she found herself in that position. She'd lost her corporate job, separated from her husband at the same time. And she said, what am I going to do now? So a friend of hers was a comedian and running workshops on how to be a stand-up comic. So she went along to do that and turned out she was really good at it. And now she runs meetup groups and she is the stand-up comic at all her meetup groups. So
It's not a
what a
bad
great
thing. It's a good
example.
thing. Yeah,
yeah,
good things can come out of
yeah,
bad things.
she
Yeah.
just decided to do it because her friend was the teacher and but she had a talent as it turns out. So
Yeah,
just do anything until you find your passion.
that's a really good example. Or maybe you want to become a public speaker on some topic. Maybe you've got a hobby where you're really good at, um, I don't know, gardening or cooking or embroidering or making toys, but you can take it to another level. But if you learn how to talk about what you're doing, so you can then reach another group, a broader community, you can start a blog or a vlog.
There were some people who'll say, "Oh, I'm not good at anything," and I've heard people say that even the local library has courses to just you can dabble your foot in, and just I think you've just got to be open, don't you, and just try.
That's the
Yeah,
Yeah.
thing.
but it's not true if someone says I'm not good at anything,
I
because
agree.
one, they're good at staying alive, and that's pretty tough at times.
Hmm.
They're good at maybe having raised kids, or they've had a job. Um, they maybe had a hobby. Maybe they're good at watching a movie or watching a TV series. Maybe they're good at just flopping on the couch and having a beer. But we all limit ourselves by thinking I'm no good at anything. And if you actually start exploring, and maybe you say, okay, I'll travel to another country where it's a different language, and I'll go to Bali or go to Vietnam or go to Japan or go to France or go to the States because they speak a strange version of English. And if you decide to travel, it might be only for a couple of weeks. That will open you up to new experiences. And if you're going to another country with a different language, that's an incentive to maybe use Duolingo or something to learn a bit of the language. And then you'll widen your brain in learning it, and it'll keep you young too.
Yeah, I think that's an important point too about being careful what you listen to or like my stepmother went to the doctors once and she was told, make sure you do all your travel before you're 70 because after 70 your body starts to break down and it gets a lot harder. So it's true, your body starts to break down and things might be a little more challenging, but he was saying get all your travel out of the way. So I mean that automatically puts that limitation and that limiting mindset
On an age
doesn't
as
it?
well, and that's not true because
Yeah,
everyone's different at every age.
yeah. So we've got to be
That's a,
careful who we mix with.
Mm,
that's a terrible thing to say to anybody.
mm,
It's not your age that's important, it's what you want to do and what you
mhm,
can do. Imagine if you have an accident and you become a paraplegic when you're 20,
mm,
or you're born with a condition does that mean you can't travel?
Mm.
People who are in wheelchairs who travel.
mm.
So that's a much more limiting thing than turning 70.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So don't set limits.
And
And
don't listen to everyone.
if you look at Dylan Alcott, the Australian of the Year wheelchair tennis champion, who I think got injured in a motorbike accident or a car accident.
Mhm,
One of the things he said, I haven't met him, but I've just seen him say it on TV and in interviews, was he initially felt great despair that his life was over. Then he decided, well, it's not over, I'm going to do stuff. And one of the things he does is goes to talk to people who similarly become quadriplegics or paraplegics to as a role model to show actually you can do a whole lot of stuff. So the limitations of the blinkers we put on ourselves or get told by someone who's blinkering us, rather than us saying it's not what you can't do, it's what you can do. It's important.
Yeah, so in eliminating ageism, we need to not be thinking of age as a concept or a construct at all, just
Go for it.
age is nothing. Just
Yeah,
keep
go.
moving.
Yeah.
Just keep moving. It's a continuum, as your father-in-law likes to say. It's just a continuum.
Yeah, it is. It's a state of mind as much as a physical thing.
Yeah.
I like that.
And so it sounds like you're busy 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And I'm a big believer in having a balanced life. Is there a downtime?
Sure, but my downtime is reading or going to a movie or watching one of the streaming services. I've really got into a lot of Korean drama and comedy, which are really top rate. And one show that we watched was called Crash Landing on You, about a young 30-something Korean rich girl who's sort of an influencer, got her own cosmetics company, goes up on a balloon to have people photograph her holding some product, and a gale blows her into North Korea. And that starts an 18-part.
Is that
series.
Netflix?
It's
Is it
on
on
Netflix.
Netflix? Oh, I
Yeah.
have to watch that.
And it's terrific. And Maggie and I went to Vietnam for a holiday in October for 2 weeks. And on our first day in Hanoi, Maggie had hired a tour guide to take us on a street food tour. And the young woman who was the tour guide, Twee, was about 21, vivacious, spoke really good English. And we discovered as we were going to different places to eat the delicious food that she also loved Korean K-drama. And so we discovered she'd watched Crash Landing on You 3 times through the whole season.
Okay.
That was a good connection.
All right. Is
So
that
for someone
movie
a
someone at our
series.
age and someone at 21-year-old both really enjoying it.
Fantastic.
finding common ground? I
Yeah.
think, was that movie Parasite, was that Korean?
Yes, Korean too, yeah.
And that was brilliant. I mean, it had such a wonderful message in there.
What about
Yeah.
Amy Wu? Wasn't she? I loved that. Amy
Oh,
Wu.
yeah, the Extraordinary Attorney Wu.
Oh, that was just so. Oh yeah, Attorney Wu was very the same sort of thing. Very, very good message. Even though she had autism, yeah, she was an attorney. Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
fabulous.
Korea-
that's another series I strongly recommend. It. Extraordinary Attorney Wu. Where
Absolutely.
you see this young woman who's just come out of university doing the law course where she's topped the thing, but she's got no social skills whatsoever because she's on the spectrum. And she gets given this job as an intern at a big law firm with 2 or 3 others who have got there. And each episode, as well as having some bizarre law case, she's slowly learning a bit about social skills. And it's
It's wonderful. I loved it. Yeah.
Well, Rob, we might bring that to a close. It's been just so wonderful talking to you. I love your attitude. It's very inspirational. And I hope that anyone who is struggling to cope with aging and thinks life is over now that they're getting older, I think they'll be really inspired by you and your attitude. And is there one piece of advice you would give to anyone who was moving into the second half of life and thinking it was over for them now?
Well, I suppose my advice is it's not over, it's starting.
Yeah, it's beginning.
And the challenge is explore different things till you find something that you want to do, that you get some pleasure from, that you get some joy from. Then you're going to have a great time.
That's lovely. Thank you, Rob. That's a
I love
really
that
nice
too.
way to
You're
finish.
Very inspiring. Yes, for everyone.
Thanks,
Thank
Kate.
you.
Thanks, Roz.
We all have to get your
Bye.
books now.
Yes.
We'll put notes at the bottom of the chapter, won't we?
Yes.
Where you can get them
I'll hold this
online.
up.
Let us have a little look at it because the Millennium is. Hang on. That's the book, and I highly recommend
That's
it.
fabulous.
It's very, very gripping, and I love the cover. Yes. Thank you, Rob. Thanks for
Pleasure.
being our guest. We love speaking with you.
That's fabulous. Thank you again. It was
Bye.
it was wonderful.
Great.
Thanks, Rob.
Nice to meet you, Roz, and good to see you, Kate.
You too.